Ever since the DJI AVATA came out, I've been literally bombarded with questions whether it's a good cinewhoop, whether you should buy one, what's the difference between this setup and a more traditional setup like this one, for example. In today's video, that's exactly what we're going to find out, and I'll give you all the necessary info so you can make your own decision what you should buy. So this right here is a GEP RC Cinelog 35 HD Performance. This is a newer version of the Cinelog 35, which is a lot more nimble, a lot faster. It almost feels like a 5-inch drone. But it's a lot noisier as well. On top of it, I have a GoPro Hero 10 Black. I have a China Hobbyline 1200 milliamp hour battery. I usually fly it with 1300 milliamp hour battery, but this is the one that I have right now. I have my Radio Master TX16S radio, and then I have the FPV goggles V2 from DJI. Whereas here we just have the DJI AVATA with the DJI remote controller. And I also have the motion controller right behind it. But that's a very, very simple setup. Whereas here we have quite a lot of things that we can customize and exchange if needed. Talking about the camera of these two different systems, obviously there is a lot of difference since we have a built-in camera here, which is not only used as an FPV camera, but that's also the action camera that you're using to record all of your footage. Whereas here we have one FPV camera that sends the signal to the goggles, and we have an action camera on top, which is up to you which one you want to use. This is the GoPro Hero 10, my camera of choice, but there's a lot of different options that you can put on top of this drone depending on your needs, depending on what camera you own and what you want to capture with it. So comparing them both, I feel they're very, very close to each other, but I still prefer the video quality of the GoPro Hero 10 Black as opposed to the DJI AVATA. But one thing I have to say is that there's a lot more tinkering with setting up the camera and just going through the settings, making sure you're using all the right settings. Whereas here, you can easily enter the goggles and do all of the settings from there. It's a lot less hassle to set up everything, and it's easier to get it going and start flying. So that's something that should be considered as well. Now, if we're talking about DVR and what you're seeing from these FPV cameras right here inside your goggles, it's a whole nother story. Now, the difference is quite massive. It's really dramatically different to fly these goggles and then put these on. After flying a couple of batteries with these goggles and feeling like I know my way around and I see everything I want to, and switching to these, it's like I've been blind and now I can see again. I know some people might find that funny because obviously DJI has great video quality and great DVR, but I've been using this for a couple of years now and I'm very used to it. And even though I'm so used to it, switching to these goggles after flying with these, it's just such a massive difference. I cannot even explain it. It's best if you have a friend who has both of these, or you are that friend and you can just use a couple of batteries so your eyes get accustomed to the video quality of the DVR of these goggles and then switch to these. You will see exactly what I mean. And for me, the first battery I did with these goggles after flying a couple of batteries with these, I felt so much more comfortable. I immediately went through some really tiny gaps that otherwise, you are less confident going through them, but you just see everything and you're more comfortable with how the drone flies, and because you see so much more, everything is so much smoother. And I know people are getting confused because the lower frame rate of these goggles, these have 100 frames per second and these have 120 frames per second. But you need to remember that frame rate is not everything. Because this was so much smoother, and I don't want to be that guy that always focuses on data and numbers and specs, because that's not what counts. What counts is a real life example, real world scenario where you actually use these on the field, because this is where the difference really happens. For the next test, I'll be doing a range/penetration test, because when it comes to the maximum flight range, the numbers that we usually get from manufacturers are highly inflated and very unrealistic. So for the DJI AVATA, for example, they say maximum flight range up to 10 kilometers in FCC mode and up to 2 kilometers in CE mode, which we're currently in right now. So up to 2 kilometers, but still I don't believe that, because it really depends on where you're flying. what type of obstacles you're flying over or behind, and you know, I just want to see which drone will perform best. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but behind me there is a little forest which is about 500 meters away. And for this test, I will fly with the DJI AVATA first, and I will see how it will perform when I go behind the trees, how much the signal will be affected, and let's see how much breakup will we have in the DVR. And then we'll do the same test with the Cinelog 35 HD Performance, which is running a CATX Vista with a 1200 milliwatt hack for FCC mode. So I'm really intrigued to see which one will perform better. Let's check it out. All right, so first the DJI AVATA. So this is the forest. As you can see, we have quite a large open field and then just this tiny patch of trees where I plan to go and fly behind. For now, of course, everything is normal, 50 megabits. Let's see how it will continue. So now we're behind the trees, about 350 meters away, and my megabits are dropping down to 25, 24, 48. It's back to normal, but quite a lot of glitchiness in my goggles, and yeah, 9 megabits, 8 megabits, 7, 6, 5, and yeah, I don't even know what's going on. Okay, yeah, that was pretty bad. I had all sorts of different colors on my goggles and inside the screen of my goggles. It was very glitchy, very stuttery, and of course it means that this is the end of the signal. This is where the signal just gets completely broken. And it was about less than 500 meters away, actually, still behind lots and lots of trees, which is definitely not the best. So we have quite a lot of obstacles that the signal needs to go through, but still, yeah, 8 megabits. This is where the signal gets really bad. These trees right here. So okay, I believe that speaks enough. So let's get the drone back and we'll do the same test with the Cinelog and see whether it will be better or worse. Alright, so Cinelog 35 Performance. Already I can say that flying with these goggles is very different. And also, the drone is like a lot faster as well. I can immediately say that. Feels a lot more like a 5-inch. Now, let's see. Okay, so pretty much same place, and we're about 1 megabit. Yeah, it's very stuttery. Probably around the same area, but it's actually a little bit worse because here we actually had better signal on the AVATA. Here it's like almost unflyable. It's 5 megabits. And now it will get better when I have a visual line of sight, but these trees right here, they were the three next to each other, those right here, they were the problem area for the AVATA. And here, even before getting to them, it's a lot worse. It's like 1 megabit all the time, and it's almost unflyable. So I would say they are pretty close, but this one obviously has worse breakup, and it gets a little bit harder to get out of the bad signal zone, if I can say that. I mean, it's worse in terms of what you're seeing inside the goggles. As you can see, I've exchanged the default antennas of these older goggles to the True RC stubby antennas, which I find are the best when you're flying a little bit closer. If you're flying a little bit long range, then I have another set of antennas that I use that are directional and work a lot better for longer flying. But for regular flying, these are also a lot more compact and don't take that much space. Whereas here, you don't have an option to exchange the antennas. They are just the basic ones that you just need to remember to pull out, because a few times I've flown the drone without putting them up, but I've quickly realized and fixed my mistake. Now the next thing I want to focus on is the remote controllers, because this remote controller right here is the one that I was going to say the one that comes with this system, but unfortunately it doesn't come with the system. I don't know why DJI has decided to not include it in the package of their different bundles that they have, but you need to buy this one separately. I think luckily for many of us, there are a lot of these controllers being sold from people who have flown the DJI FPV drone and they're getting rid of it. So you can find a secondhand remote controller like this for a very cheap price. But if not, you have to buy it separately from DJI's website. And if you want to fly manually with this drone and not rely on this controller that comes in the box, you have to buy it separately, which is a huge bummer. And like I said again, I don't understand that business decision from DJI, but that's what they've decided. And here I have a custom Radiomaster TX16S, which is arguably the most popular radio for FPV. And I really love the look of this, especially with the gold accents, but it's very, very bulky. I don't mind that. I do prefer the smaller form factor of remote controllers like these, for example, but I'm quite used to having a big radio like this for my FPV drones, so it's really not a big deal. But I have to say there's a lot of customization, a lot of different products are available that you can choose from if you're looking to buy and fly a system like this one. You don't have to use such a bulky controller. There are so many other ones. There's a Tango 2 that has the same form factor as this. So if you're looking for a smaller radio, there's definitely a lot of different options that you can find, and they're also very, very cheap. Now, on top of the radio, I also have a Crossfire module, which is again something that you need to consider if you're looking to fly a more traditional setup like this right here. This is the link between my remote controller and the drone itself. So there is a receiver that you need to solder on top of the flight controller so it can talk to the radio, and that will give you a little bit better signal. Crossfire usually is the go-to system for flying a traditional FPV drone like this, but you can also go different ways like ELRS or Tracer or so many other ones that are popular in the FPV world. But again, they take a lot of time to learn about, to tinker with, and also to install and get them working. So again, there's something that needs to be considered if you are just starting out. If you're looking for which system is better for you, this will take a lot more time to figure out. Whereas here, everything just works straight out of the box. You just need to bind the goggles to the drone and the remote to the drone, and that's it. And it takes 30 seconds to do that, and you're good to go. Let's talk battery life. The promised flight time of the DJI AVATA is up to 18 minutes, which is quite unrealistic, but the usual flight time I'm actually getting on a regular basis is about 10 to 12 minutes with a fast cruising speed on the drone. If I really push the drone for maximum flight time, I'm sure I'll be able to squeeze out about 14 minutes out of it. But it needs to be very slow and very like boring type of flying. So I'm not sure why you would do that, just to squeeze out more battery life from the drone. For regular flying that doesn't involve a lot of high speed chasing or a lot of flips and rolls, 10 to 12 minutes is the realistic flight time that you should expect from this drone. Whereas on a setup like this, usually the flight time is about 5 minutes, maximum 6, with a GoPro on it and a 1300 milliamp hour battery. Now it really depends what type of battery you're using. You can of course always put a bigger battery on it, but of course that's also heavier, so the performance of the drone will be a little bit worse. And since the weight is higher, that will also limit your flight time. So it's really a fine balance between finding the right battery for this drone. Usually I think a 1200 to 1300 milliamp hour 6S battery is the best choice for a Cinelog 35 HD like this one. And of course the GoPro is quite heavy as well. If you're flying without a GoPro or you're using a smaller camera that's a little bit lighter, you will have a little bit more flight time, but still it's half the flight time of the AVATA, and that's something that shouldn't be underestimated because you can do a lot for 5 or 6 minutes of flying with both of these systems, and not having to land and change the battery all the time is something that I like. And of course, that's the reason why I prefer the AVATA when it comes to the battery life. Similarly to any other DJI drone, this one is made to be used by a huge variety of different people with different backgrounds, different tech knowledge, and you know, DJI wants to make it as simple as possible so everyone can enjoy it. And that doesn't just make sense here in the regular FPV setup, but here it is a lot easier to get started with a system like this because you don't need to learn about charging your battery. You don't need to learn about soldering. You don't need to learn about building your own drone and fixing it afterwards. It just works. Yes, it's a lot more expensive, but that's the price you're paying for having that simplicity in your life. Whereas here, there's so many things you need to learn before you even get in the air. Learning how to properly charge your batteries so they don't burn your house down. Learning how to solder in case a cable pops up and now your drone doesn't want to start up. Learning how to troubleshoot when something goes wrong and you can't take off with the drone. Or learning how to fix your drone when you inevitably crash it. Those are all skills that you need to learn if you want to fly this. And here you still can work on your drone because there are some spare parts that DJI sells on their website, but majority of people will just buy care refresh and send the drone back to DJI for repair in case something happens. But for the most part, you don't have a lot of control over the things that go inside the drone and happen in the system that makes the drone fly. When it comes to spare parts, it's a very similar situation. Almost no spare parts for this system right here, whereas here there's so many different companies and third-party accessories that you can buy to customize the look, the feel, and the performance of your drone that it's just crazy. You can exchange the frame, the ESC, the flight controller, the props, the motors, everything you can think of can be replaced, and there are accessory that goes for every single drone that you can buy to customize it or make it even better if you feel like it. I'm not sure if it's a very good analogy for this, but this is like building your own PC with all the different components and parts that you like, whereas this is like buying a Mac inside an Apple store that is just built for you, ready to go. It's a lot more expensive, but it just works. A lot more troubleshooting and fixing up in case something happens because there's a lot more to go wrong. It just works. Now, before you blame me of being a fanboy of the AVATA and the new system from DJI, you have to know I started FPV about 3 years ago, almost 3 years, with DJI, and I went through a lot of different drones. I used analog as well. I've tried a lot of different things, and I've been through a lot of hard times with dealing with my drones and going through problems with them not acting like they should. So that's the reason why I can certainly appreciate a system like this one, especially when I put myself into the shoes of the beginner who still hasn't really dealt with this and who is going to need a lot of patience to learn about all this. I know not everyone has the time, not everyone has the patience, not everyone wants to deal with this. Some people just want to throw some money, get the gear, and be able to use it within the same day. And I'm not like that, but I understand why that happens. And when it comes to giving you guys an advice on which one is the better system, which one you should buy, it's really hard because people are different and they have their own different opinions on things. Obviously, people have different budgets and different needs. So it's really hard, but hopefully by this time you will have your own opinion formed because of all the information that I gave you about which is going to work better for you. Now, when it comes to me, it's it's really hard to say, because I've enjoyed this system so much, and especially now with this recent firmware update where you have the gyro data available from the drone, and you can use that data to stabilize additionally your footage through a software like GyroFlow, for example. So if you're not happy with the stabilization that this drone has, you can apply stabilization in post and really tweak it to make it work perfectly for you. So with that, I think for now I'm a little bit more focused on this system, and I think I prefer it a little bit more. Maybe it's the excitement of having it because it's still quite new. But for now, if I have to choose which one I want to fly, even though this is a really sick drone that flies really well and it's just amazingly fast and very nimble and has tons of power, I would probably still choose the AVATA because of that amazing video quality inside your goggles. The feed inside the goggles is just stunning. It's really stunning. And please, if you have the chance, find a way to fly with this a couple of batteries and then switch to this. You will immediately know what I'm talking about. I promise you. Something major that I dislike about this system that we don't have here is geofencing. And just like any other DJI drone, this one has geofencing enabled. So far, I haven't had any problems with that because I've been flying in places where I'm allowed to fly. But I've had a couple of pop-ups on the screen of the goggles letting me know about a warning zone. So I suppose if I go to a no-fly zone, I won't be able to take off, which of course makes sense. But that's something that you don't have here on this system. And while I do respect the fact that we need to fly in places where we are allowed to fly, of course, sometimes there are some mistakes when it comes to no-fly zones or authorization zones and stuff like that. So that's something to consider as well, depending on where you live. There are a lot of zones near some people's houses, and maybe that will be a deal breaker for you. I don't know. For me, it's not, but I know some people will really dislike this. So yeah, that's something that I wanted to mention before I forget. You don't have that issue here on this in this system, whereas here you really need to comply with the law. And finally, when it comes to the price, I believe we have quite a big difference between the two, mostly because of that exclusivity that I talked about earlier, because you don't have other components that you can use in the system. You need to use those. Whereas here you can swap pretty much everything you like for something cheaper or something that you prefer to use, because you have a lot of freedom to pick the components that you like. You can start with one radio, you can later upgrade to a better radio, and you can still use that very same drone if you like. Or you can build your drone gradually by giving it better motors after some time, or buying it fresher, newer, bigger batteries, for example, or a better action camera. You can always exchange those things and swap them for better components, whereas here you're stuck with what you're getting, and what you're getting is quite expensive. So in the end, it really matters what your needs are, what your budget is, how much you're willing to sacrifice when it comes to being a little bit locked inside the system, or being completely free in choosing everything you want with this, but still using a little bit older technology when it comes to the transmission or the video quality inside the goggles. It's really up to your needs and what you want to do with that drone. Both really have their pros and cons, and I'm looking to be able to use both for my needs and just really take them for what they are and appreciate their strong points. If I had to choose, it will be really, really hard. For now, I would choose this, but I might change my opinion next week. I really don't know. I really hope this video was useful for you. You were able to form your opinion on which one is the better system for you. Let me know in the comment section below, and keep it respectful. Nobody is better because of flying a certain system, whether it's analog, digital, AVATA, or whatever it is. No one is better than the other because of having it. So keep it respectful. I'll see you down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.